Do you ever struggle with fear and self-doubt when it comes to pursuing your God-given purpose? Do you ever ask yourself questions like, who am I to dream so big? Do you ever feel like you are not worthy to do great things? In today's video, author of The Dream of You, Jo Saxton, shares with us how to let go of broken identities and live the dream we were made for. Stay tuned. Hello, beloved, and welcome to Beloved Women with me, Christina Patterson, where we encourage, uplift, and equip women in the love of Jesus Christ and the truth of God's Word. If you're new here, welcome. I post new videos every week, so please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a video. And for those of you returning, welcome back, girlfriend. In today's video, I had the opportunity to chat with author, speaker, and pastor Jo Saxton about her latest book, The Dream of You. Jo Saxton is chair of the board of 3D Movements, a nonprofit organization that seeks to change the world by putting discipleship and mission back into the hands of ordinary people. She pastors alongside her husband at Mission Point Church and is a leadership coach and consultant. Born to Nigerian parents and raised in London, Jo co-hosts the Lead Stories podcast and serves as advisor for Christianity Today Women. Enjoy my interview with Jo Saxton as we chat about the importance of knowing your identity in Christ as you pursue your God-given dreams and purpose. Today, we have with us Christian speaker, author, and pastor Jo Saxton to talk about her latest book, The Dream of You. Welcome to Beloved, Jo.
Hi, it's good to be with you.
First of all, I just want to say congratulations. I have a copy here.
Oh,
and so I've already had an opportunity to devour this book. So I'm so excited to chat with our viewers about it with you. So I just want to kind of get started and ask you to tell us about what will readers get from The Dream of You, and what was your inspiration behind this book?
My inspiration really came from meeting a lot of women as I was traveling and speaking, faithful women, searching women, hurting women who all were like, okay, I'm meant to be healthier than this right now. Or who, you know, it wasn't even just the conversations or the speaking at the event. It was the conversations at the side, or the ones you'd have over a meal, or the things that people would make them look down or look away, that I was struck by. And what the ongoing theme with all these women, different ages, different generations, different cultural backgrounds, was there was a disconnect between the life we wanted and hoped we'd be and hoped we'd have, and our reality. And there was and that's not a great shock to us, but I think the thing I found that really hit home was for those who profess to be Christians, it was I'm meant to be better than this. God's done all this. He set me free. So why am I not living any of that in my life? Why am I not seeing that? And what would often happen is that rather than that question leading us on a journey, it would lead us to an accusation of ourselves, where we take blame and shame and guilt, and so then present something else in order to kind of cover it up. And so I think that, and it was so the inspiration was me wanting to come home to the thought of, okay, we have these dreams, we have these goals, we have this vision and purpose, and the journey is not easy. We know that now. But what does it actually look like to let go of your broken identity and pick up God's identity and purpose? And if we could do that, what difference would it make?
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is really powerful. In the book, you talk about one of the ways that women pick up these broken identities is just kind of having these like false ideas about what we think it means to be a woman or a good Christian woman, you know, and you talk a lot about wanting to be Wonder Woman as a little girl and wanting to wear her red boots and all of that. And I think in many ways, in our heads, a lot of women have this Wonder Woman mentality about, we have this ideal of what we think that we should be, even though it's not realistic. If we really sit down and think about it, why do you think it's so hard for women to let go of these unrealistic ideals and just accept, like you said, Christ's identity instead of trying to fabricate some other identity that doesn't even make sense?
I mean, I think there are multiple reasons. I think some of it is no one wants to go first, you know? No one wants to go first and say, I'm done, because
I'm broken. I can't be,
I'm sorry, I'm a mess. No one wants to go first and say that. No one wants to not have their act together. on that level. So I think that's part of it. I think some of it is we live it because sometimes the brokenness causes us to do that, to have these oughts and these shoulds. And I think every culture, and I think there are nuances. I think it looks different for each cultural group. For what it looks like for me as a Nigerian woman and as a Brit as well, and what it looks like for me has been different to some of my African American sisters, my Latina sisters, that because of our cultural stories are different. But I think there are expectations in all our cultures of what we're supposed to be. And we get messages every day from the things that we watch, from the music we listen to, the magazines that we read, that tell us to aspire for nothing less. And I think in an era where I was going to say more opportunity, and I think that just depends on who you are sometimes, but when there seems to be potential for more opportunity, then you even want to be even more. And so I think it's just hard. I think it's hard because people want to do the right thing. They want to, if they have kids, they want to raise their kids well. If they have a job, they want to do the job well. If they're looking after family, they want to look after family well. No one wants to do a bad job. Right. And I think there is a cultural expectation on women to be everything. To increasingly to be everything, and you can't let anything go.
Right. And I mean, I think you kind of talked about that in the book. Oh, this is what I want to say. At the beginning of each chapter, you have these like letters that you write to the reader, and every one that I read, I was like, she read my prayer journal. She is all up in my Kool-Aid. Like, yes, that is me. Yes. And so I really love that about the book. One thing that you said that really stuck out to me was that we really need to take time for soul care.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what you talked about just kind of accepting our brokenness and being the first ones to kind of be like, I don't have it all together, and able to, in order to face that, you do have to have time for soul care and to give your mind space to like think and your heart space to like breathe, but then we are, and you share this in the book, like, but the bills still got to get paid. The kids got to get to school. You know what I'm saying? My husband needs some attention. My, taxes got, for my business, I got to handle that too. Yeah. And mentally, I think we're just so bogged down as women because there's so much that we, there's certain things that you really, realistically, this does need to get done today. You know what I mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how can we practically practice soul care when we do feel like there are certain things we legitimately just have to get done,
Yeah. I think there are a couple of things because I think this is my ongoing struggle. And I think I look at it every year, I take a different approach, depending on my kids' ages, depending on the challenges our family is facing. And so the first thing I would say to us is there is one size doesn't fit all, and not all the time.
Right. That's good. That's good.
I like to experiment with things. The second thing, and it's a friend of mine who said this, that there's a difference. I think Sarah Bessie, this friend of mine, her name is, and she said there's a difference between soul comfort and soul care. And so sometimes I have given ample time to soul comfort. Did I need to watch This Is Us season 2 in one sitting?
You did, Jo. Yes.
On one level, I needed to watch it all, but did I need to watch 5 consecutive episodes? 5 in one, and I wasn't feeling well, so I was sat in bed. But do you know what I mean? I think sometimes there are moments where I'm like, I need times where you're just regenerating for sure. You know what I mean? And all of that. But I sometimes have had to look and say, where have I given time to soul comfort and not to soul care?
That's good.
And then I've had to ask myself. And for me, I'm an immigrant's daughter and an immigrant, and the kind of the work ethic is insanity. Because you are laying foundations for a new life, and taking care of your parents overseas and taking care of your kids here, or at least they're all in your mind, even if you're not doing it, they're in your head. Of what you're meant to do. Yeah. And so days off are for other people.
That's right.
Days off are for people who have been able to get themselves established. Vacation time is for people who get paid. Do you know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. And but I've also had to pay attention to my body. When my body is acting up, and that I can't violate my design specifications forever. And so I've learned to ask myself a couple of questions. What gives me life? because that's a good way for my soul. What ways do I connect with God, really? You know, so for me, I have lots of really deep conversations with God when I'm working out. Because it deals with all the physical intensity. Do you know what I mean? Of the stress and the pressure. When I come to God just purely in stress and pressure, I'm just like, Lord, here is my list. And I'm a big fan of lists, real quick, but you rush it. And so I've needed to have things that have taken care of my body and soul so that God can actually get to me, you know?
Right. That's really good.
So I would recommend that we ask ourselves some questions, and where we don't have time, where can we, with a friend, give each other time? You know, if someone can, I remember one of my friends a few years ago, we were both working at the same church, and she'd had 2 kids in a very short space of time. And what we did was, I remember going to her house so she could have a shower. Do you know what I mean? She just needed you know what I mean? Those moments. And I think sometimes there are ways in which we can do this as a community, where your sister needs a morning. She needs a morning, or she needs you to take that kid for half an hour. She doesn't care if they're watching movies at your house and eating pizza, or if it's leftovers, or what you're doing. Or she needs to do that, or she needs you to do something. Give her what does it look like to gift somebody an hour?
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful.
So that they can, and what does it look like for us to, well, sometimes admit we need an hour, but also to,
it's hard to ask for it. It's hard to ask for it sometimes, because, you know, she got kids too, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, and it's like, do you want to be, like, I was never great at, like, let's all have our kids together under one roof. And I'm like, no, I can't do 6. I can't do 6 today. I can't do that. I can do other things. You know, one of my friends is like, come one, come all. I'm like, no.
God bless. She got that gift.
I bless your gift. I have other ones to share. And so I think, do you know what I mean? I think we have to work through our limitations and be honest about them, but to give ourselves some room. Because I tell you the thing, if we don't give ourselves soul care, life takes care of us in bad ways. You know,
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
It won't be a good nurturer. It won't. And then before I know it, my soul care is gone into my ice cream, or into that carbohydrate, or coming. I'll binge it out in something else. And that doesn't take it. I mean, it's a lovely taste, obviously. And
in the moment. Yeah.
I mean, the few pounds that add on later isn't great, but it's not. I think sometimes we substituted the need for soul care with other things, and we just got to check. We got to ask ourselves questions about that, and then come out with a plan after we've come out with the questions. Right.
Because I think that you said this quote in the book. It kind of reminded you. What you just said reminded me. You said, this was about busyness, but it was just like, is your busyness a failed attempt to fill empty spaces in your life? You know, and sometimes I think as women, when we need soul care and we're tired and we're weary, we feel like, oh, I just got to push through. I just got to you know, plow my way through this whole season, you know, and it's really like, no, you're weary because you just need to take a nap. You know, it doesn't mean you need to do more. It means you might need to cut some things out. But I also like what you said about making plans around what season that you're in. Because I was talking to my friend one time and I was like, I don't understand why, you know, I'm not, you know, being as productive right now as I was last year. And then she was like, well, Christina, you know, last year your son was an infant. He just, you know, was sleeping and eating. So you could get up and now he's a toddler and he's running around. You're not going to be able to do as much. And I was like, you're right. You know, so I was comparing my last year self to this year self and feeling bad about it. And she just had to remind me, like, you're in a totally different season right now. So it's almost like every now and then we kind of have to like reevaluate, where am I at in life? What is God actually calling me to do? Not the little extra stuff that I'm adding on just so I can be, you know, Wonder Woman. And live my life accordingly to that. Absolutely. And not some made up plan. So I really like that you brought that out. You touched on just like your background and this need to feel like I have to work harder and be harder. In your book, you talk about a conversation that you had with your aunt. You call it The Talk, you know, and it's this conversation that, you know, a lot of Black parents and aunts have with their children about, you have to work harder and be better and run faster and farther than anybody if you want to, you know, succeed equally as them, you know. And I was just kind of curious to know, did you have that talk with your daughters, and how has it changed from when you were a child to now?
Wow. I mean, it's a sobering one, actually, because I wasn't sure whether I'd have to have the talk with my daughters.
Right. Yeah. Or even if you will.
Or if I will, and the world is so different. I mean, obviously, my kids have been raised here in the US as well. So there was a different dynamic. Economically, we're in a different position to what I was when I was a child. But equally, and the other thing is my kids are biracial as well. Right. But, at the same time, in the climate that we find ourselves, it's a complicated one. And in the past 5, 6, for me, my first experience of someone, racism, and I was probably 3 or 4. For my kids, it was 7 or 8. It was a bit later. But I think now, as they become more aware of their identity and more aware of who they are, we do find ourselves having conversations. And in one level, it broke my heart a bit to think that we're still having to have the kind of, okay, but I think for me, it's I began the conversation with, okay, I need you to know the world isn't fair. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I need you to know the world isn't fair. And because it's not fair, there will be things that it demands of you. That there, and so that's how the conversation began. It was with my 12-year-old and said, the world isn't fair. And but I said to her, it's not the same as when I was a kid, because she said, was this the truth for you? And I said, yeah, but in different ways. Mm-hmm. And it's that hard thing. And I think of my aunt now and just how complicated a conversation that was. She was trying to help me understand. In terms of when she was saying, Joe, you're going to have to be twice as good, 3 times as good, I remember saying, as everybody else. And I remember how challenging it must have been for her. And then me trying to think, how do you help a 12-year-old understand an unfair world where you are limited and defined on account of gender or race? And when they see things in the news in terms of sexual harassment, or they see things in the news on account of race, and they're saying, what do I do with this world? Or they encounter things at their own school as well. And that's been part of our journey. So there has been some conversations of saying the world isn't fair. And these are some of the standards that you will be held to, or some of the things that won't be that will be true for you, that won't be true with some of your peers. And and these are some of the ways we're going to navigate it. And I think at this stage, because I've not wanted to put a kind of like yoke on, do you know what I mean, and put this massive burden on, I've said, okay, let's start this conversation. Has been how I've approached it.
Just get it started, yeah.
Because I realized we do need to get the conversation started. And let's talk through some of the cultural stereotypes that you see and how you feel about them. Let's talk through some of the cultural stereotypes you see I encounter as a Black woman, as a dark-skinned Black woman, as a Brit, but still a Nigerian. Do you know what I mean? Let's talk, and that's begun the conversations of, because I don't want my children to be burnt out either, Right. That's the thing. I mean, when my aunt gave me the talk, and it was, I'm very grateful for the advice she gave. I really am. But you don't know the cost of it either. You don't know the cost of when and I say this particularly for me as a woman of color, and at a time in London where it wasn't cool to be Nigerian. I mean, it's fabulous now apparently, but it's not. It wasn't great then. But when the cost, the driving to prove yourself, and how tiring it was on your body and on your being, and how that had impacted my aunts and my mum and others for years and years and years, and how you don't always know when to stop. Yeah. And you come to
don't feel like you can.
No. When is it safe? When is it safe to say I've done enough now? When is it? When do I look at the world around me and say, okay, it's equal now?
Right. Yeah. But you said, not wanting to put like that heavy yoke on your daughter. How does your faith play into helping not only your daughters but other women understand, the necessity to get things done and work harder, but not like taking it on like this is, if I don't get something done, I'm a complete failure, and this is my whole identity is what I do.
Yeah. I've had to I think one of the things that I've had to do and find as a spiritual practice I need to keep on doing is to keep on recognizing that I was always enough for the Lord.
That's good.
For me, it's the regular discipline of coming to Psalm 139 and saying, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That there is nothing in my color, in my being, in my ethnicity, in my culture that was a surprise to the Lord. You know, that was like, it wasn't a concession in any way. And I find myself still having to say, that is my base level. That is my foundation. The world may not agree with it. My flesh may not always agree with it, but this is the truth on which I stand. And it's interesting. It was one of the first verses that I taught my kids, you know, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Right. And so those have been my foundations. And honestly, I have to keep refreshing myself in that truth. The next time I receive some racist response, or the next time I receive some gender related, or the intersection of the two, frankly, it's no, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And you have made you delight in how I am. You delight in the gifts you've given me. You delight in them. And they do have a place in this world. They are part of your contribution for the renewal of all things. I'm not saying I play a better or bigger part than anybody else, but I'm called. I'm as called as anybody else.
I don't want to downplay that.
I don't want to downplay that. So that's the first thing. And then the next thing I come before the Lord with is, Lord, yeah, but it's still not a fair world. So
let's get real.
Let's get real, because we have to get real with that. And so there have been long walks of grieving. You know, I remember there was one time, it was probably earlier this year, where I took the dog for a walk and just sobbed because I was just so frustrated and angry at the lack of opportunity. And in many ways I have certain opportunities, but there are plenty of disparities I realize are going on as well at the same time. And I'm like, oh, I did not know this was not okay. Okay. I'm like, Lord, I'm about to forget I'm a Christian on these sort of things, and come before the Lord, and I've grieved, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know who else to pour out my soul to, because I don't even know where it's safe all the time to pour out my soul on some of these things. And so I would grieve, and then the next level of real talk was, God, I know how to circumvent the system if I go twice as good, 3 times as good, but I don't know that you want me to do that. And two, the price what it costs my body and my being, and therefore my children, my marriage, my family, is too high a price to pay. So I'm going to need you to catch me a break.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm going to need your miracles to get us to places. And because when I look at the word, I see that God knows the stories of oppressed peoples, you know, and marginalized people. And I see he brought the Israelites out of Egypt. Yes. He raised up Daniel in the middle of the exile. When Jesus walked the streets, they were oppressed by the Romans. And yet, and it's the and yet that I lean on, cling to, keep holding back to the Lord and stuff, knowing that it sometimes feels like 2 steps forward, 25 steps back. 25 steps back. But you want the room and the freedom just to be faithful to your calling, you know? And so that's the journey I still find, even now, I still find myself on with the Lord, and the conversations I'm having with people. Right.
And having to lean on him.
Yeah.
For that. You talk about calling. I'm glad that you brought that up, because when it comes to, and even just the dream of you know, and the dreams that you have, and not shying away from them. You talk about the imposter syndrome. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah, well, and the original research was done by two women academics in the late 70s. And I think they were either talking to fellow academics or engineers, women in engineering. And they found this, and I think they initially called it the imposter experience or phenomenon. And the phenomenon was this, that these women who were highly accomplished, who had done great things, felt like they were frauds. And the common features were, they felt like they were frauds, they felt like they were fakes, and that they would be exposed at any given moment for being ill-equipped and unqualified for their jobs, even though they were already overqualified. They were or more. And so it's come to, the phrase has come to describe most often women who have a voice, who have a contribution, who have something to offer, but who are doubting themselves again and again, and in their minds are questioning and thinking, I ain't really got the stuff.
Right.
I ain't really got the goods. And at some point, somebody's going to know. And then you take it to the next level, and it's, who do I think I am? Who do I think I am for having that idea? Who do I think I am for having that dream? I'm not that person. So because I'm not that person and I don't have their opportunities, I shouldn't even be doing this. I need to keep myself quiet. And we dumb down our voice, and we say I don't know when we know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But when you were writing about it, I was relating to it so much.
Yeah.
And then, I'll think like, oh, wow, there are people out there that actually like go for their dreams and their goals, and like, they don't have that second guess in the back of their head. They're not self-doubt like that. That's possible to do that. Like, cause for me, I know I do that all the time. Like when you said, who do you think you are? I caught myself last year asking myself that a lot. Like, oh, maybe we should do this. I'm like, well, who do you think I do that? And I had a friend challenge me and be like, well, why would you even ask that? Well, why not do it? Why? Yeah. There's a problem that you're even asking that. So I was like, oh, really? Okay.
And I think
so. How can we? I guess address this.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of that again was another one of the threads for the dream of you, because if you don't know who you are, you don't feel confident in how to be. You know what I mean? When your identity is shaky or on shaky foundations, or if the hurts of the past or the fears of the past are still speaking really loud, then you don't live into your purpose. Identity is the birthplace for your purpose. So you've got to have the identity secure, and you've got to know that it's not just when identity is based on achievements, you've got to keep achieving. When identity is based on who God says you are, then you've got to know him. You've got to know him and do the exchange of God. This is my junk. This is your truth. This is my life. This is your life. This is the dream you already had of me, which already involved purpose. Because whenever in creation, when God created people, he gave them purpose instantly. They already had, it was the overflow of who they were. They were his, and so they represented him in the world. And so I think some of it for us is when you're shaky on your purpose, ask a few questions about identity. Ask yourself if it's not, I mean, sometimes it's shaky because you're like, okay, I need to make some connections and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't feel confident in putting your voice out there, what's that about? Do you think you don't have a voice? Do you think your voice isn't good enough? Then you go back to your identity again and say, okay, what is it that makes it okay for me to think I don't have something to say when the God of the universe gave me a voice? Right. What is it? Do I have some giants I need to slay? Do I need to look in the mirror and know I'm fearfully and wonderfully made? Am I hearing the old stories? Am I still defined by that teacher who said I was never going to amount to this? Am I defined by the lack of opportunity I was given as a young person? Am I defined by I didn't go to a great school, so I didn't have this? Or am I defined by that terrible encounter where I was violated and that has stolen my confidence? All of those things. And so I have often found that the identity question begins for many of us when we push into purpose, because we can't work out why we can't push that wall back. And we've had to come back and say, yeah, actually, it's a good question. Who do I think I am? What is the dreams I had? And what was God's dream for me? Because if we start back there, then we're not walking on the lies anymore. And when the accusation, the lies of the evil one, our experiences of saying you're nothing and all that, it's like, that's an old story. I was nothing. You're right. I was broken. I was lost. I made these mistakes. I was labeled. But you know what? My Redeemer lives. And so because of that, I can walk forward again. And do you see what I'm saying?
That's good. That's really good.
But otherwise, we find ourselves isolated, fighting these feelings. And the best we can do is feel them and keep going forward. But the thing is, that's so debilitating if we live like that.
That's exhausting.
It's so tiring. And all that energy that we're expending on trying to fight this fight by ourselves, we could be using in propelling the kingdom of God. And so I often encourage us to, when I'm talking with women, I say, ask yourself a couple of questions. When you're feeling nervous, do you feel inadequate because that person's got something that you don't have, when actually you've got a contribution to make? If you and I often I ask people like, who were you before anybody said what you were supposed to be? What did you have? Or if you weren't afraid, what would you do? What would you do? Because I genuinely, Christian, I genuinely believe this, that there are NGOs that we're not starting. There are businesses that we're not doing. There are YouTube channels that we're not launching. There are blogs, podcasts, creative enterprises, creative ideas that are from the heartbeat of God, that he is seeded in his sons and daughters, that we're not living. And because once the enemy gets you on identity, you lose all authority to step into anything else. You won't even bother. He doesn't have to fight you later because he's dealt with it as a seed.
Wow, at the core.
At the core, at the very beginning. And the genius of that deception is that it turns it on ourselves and makes us think, well, you're terrible for even wanting to do that. How is it terrible for wanting to set up a channel that brings light and life to people and hope to people? How's it terrible to set up an NGO which works with aged out foster kids? How is it terrible to want to communicate God's truth to hundreds of people? That means hundreds of people get to hear it, you know? And yet somehow we've been tricked into thinking, like, well, who do you think you are? Why don't you stick to your little thing and call that humility? And it's a lie. It's a lie. And it's a lie that serves not the kingdom of God. You know right. It doesn't do anything for us. But then we just feel bad and then think, well, I'll just make myself less and call it holiness, you know, and that's not what he asked for. Right.
He wants glory. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to go hide in a corner and never be seen.
Absolutely. Right. And he's perfectly capable, you know, because I think sometimes we're like, well, I know my heart and I know my motives. God is more than capable of dealing with our pride on the journey. Do you know? I mean, he's
I
good.
think there is this fear of like, well, I don't want to get too prideful or I don't want to mess up. You know what I mean? So maybe I just shouldn't go at all. Maybe I should just do anything so I can avoid messing up.
Totally. And we take it to the extremes, partly because we want to do right by the Lord. You know, we want to honor him and we want to love him well. And we want to love the people around us. And it's like, I don't want to make a mistake. But it's like, you know, when I often think of it of when my kids started walking and when my daughter, my eldest started walking, I remember being so excited seeing the first 2 steps, you know, and I didn't look and think, you know, the kids' steps are like this, you know, they're wobbly and they're waddling and you don't quite know how they manage to make it all balance. And you don't look at that child and think, oh my gosh, you're never going to do a half marathon. You celebrate the 2 steps. Because those 2 steps, as they make those little steps, they become those other steps and more steps until you're chasing them around the house and all that kind of stuff with a toddler. And then they do races at school. And then, there's a whole journey. And I think rather than us look and think, oh, my gosh, I could never reach that goal. Or who do I think I am to get there? Or I'm too proud. Take the 2 steps. Take the 2 steps. And the Lord will meet us in that place. And his power is made perfect in our weakness anyway. You know, that's the beauty of this stuff. On one level, we can't do it without messing up, but we're not doing it for him. We're doing it with him. You know, that's the beauty of his dream for our lives, is that it's a purpose where we partner with the King of Kings in the process of making all things new. So, but if we don't take any steps, then nothing happens. We don't get stronger. We don't get more mature. We don't grow. We don't discover new things. We just get nowhere.
Right.
And God take a step. And God's not, and exactly. And God is not glorified.
Yeah. If we really have a heart to want to glorify God, we take that step of faith and trust him in the journey.
Totally. Yeah. And trust that he is bigger than even our greatest weakness.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you so much, Jo. Beloved sisters, if you find yourself struggling with the imposter syndrome or fear to step out in your true dreams or struggling with your identity in Christ, I highly suggest getting the Dream of You that is out today. Jo, I thank you again so much for joining us here at Beloved. Can you tell our beloved sisters if they want to connect with you, how they can find you on the internets?
Yes, on the internet. My website is josaxton.com.
Okay.
Everything social media is the same. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook page, you'll find me there. And that'll give you information of all the things I'm doing, travel schedules, when I'm speaking, podcast, all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Perfect. So please, y'all, check her out. Get the book, The Dream of You, in stores now and online. And then comment on this video and let us know what you think about it.
Yes.
For even more beloved encouragement, like daily devotionals, practical advice for everyday Christian living, Bible studies, and more, be sure to download the Beloved Women mobile app, available in the Apple and Google Play stores, or visit us online at belovedwomen.org. Thanks so much for joining us. And until next time, be beautiful, be blessed, and be loved.